Hi guys, Timothy here. I used to think social media challenges were just dumb fun. You scroll past and forget, until I encountered these cases nobody talks about. From a retail worker who let strangers on the internet vote on what to wrap around his body, to a woman who got out of a moving car on a highway and ended up in the most unthinkable way imaginable. It was March 3rd, 2016, and the sun had already dropped behind the rooflines of a quiet suburban neighborhood on the outskirts of Phoenix. The air was still warm, mid-70s even after dark, and the only sounds were the occasional dog barking and the low hum of air conditioning units. Out back, behind one of the houses, a concrete patio sat under a single floodlight, cluttered with folding chairs, a cheap tripod, and a camera already recording. Tom Martin was 24. He worked retail during the day, stocking shelves and running a register. But at night, he ran a small challenge page where viewers voted on physical endurance tasks, filming them in his backyard. No sponsors, no team, just him and one friend behind the camera. The kind of setup where nobody was making money. They just did it because people watched. And people did watch, enough that the challenges kept escalating. The latest poll landed on a full-body duct tape wrap. Get wrapped head to toe, no tools allowed, try to break free. So that night, Tom and his friend got to work. 17 rolls of duct tape. They started at the ankles and worked up. Legs, thighs, hips, torso. The heaviest layers went around his abdomen and lower ribs, wrapped tight and repeated. The wrapping around his midsection wasn't just snug, it was pulled aggressively tight, compressing the exact area where the diaphragm needs to expand with every breath. His arms were pinned flat against his sides. By the time they finished, Tom looked like a silver cocoon standing upright on concrete. No quick-release plan, no scissors within reach. I want to pause here because this is the part that gets me. There's no villain in this story. No freak accident, just a 24-year-old wrapped in tape because strangers on the internet clicked a button. I personally think this is one of the clearest examples of how a harmless challenge crosses a line nobody sees coming. And neither of them understood what 17 rolls of tight tape around a human torso does to breathing. Once filming started, Tom tried to twist and pull, but every movement made it worse. The tape didn't stretch, it cinched tighter around his stomach and diaphragm. Within moments, his breathing shifted. His chest was barely moving. He couldn't expand his abdomen, so his body switched to shallow upper chest breathing, fast, minimal. The struggle stretched on longer than expected. Within the first minute, his breathing had already changed. By the third, his movements slowed. Past 5 minutes, there was no recovery. Only weaker movements and longer pauses between breaths. Then his posture changed, knees bending slightly, torso leaning forward, further compressing the diaphragm. His lungs could no longer fully expand. His breathing became uneven, shallow pulls followed by stillness. Movement reduced to small, ineffective shifts. He stayed partially slumped but held upright by the tape, looking like he was still standing, still in the challenge, but barely responsive. This is where the panic sets in. Not sudden collapse, but a drawn-out inability to get a full breath, driving the heart rate higher and higher. At first, it didn't seem serious, but when his movement slowed, his friend stepped in and started cutting. 17 rolls of layered tape didn't come off fast. It took several minutes to reach his chest. By the time Tom was freed and laid flat, there was no effective breathing or purposeful movement. Emergency services were called, but he was pronounced dead after arrival. The cause of death was consistent with positional asphyxia due to restricted diaphragm movement and compressed abdominal expansion. There were no signs of external trauma, only compression marks across his torso. The footage documented the full progression, from the initial struggle to the gradual loss of movement. A lot of you said in my last video this could never happen to you, but stories like this prove how quickly things can go wrong. And for me, the next case is even harder, because this time it wasn't a controlled setup with someone ready to step in. It was one man, alone, pushing his limits without anyone there to stop it when things started to collapse. It was November 11th, 2018, and Austin, Texas was sitting in that comfortable mid-fall pocket. Low 60s, overcast, the kind of evening where most people were inside with the windows cracked. The city was winding down for the night, and in a second-floor apartment off one of the quieter residential streets, the kitchen light was on and a camera was already running. Henrik Tronz was 31. During the day, he did freelance work, odd jobs, nothing consistent. But online, he'd built a small following around food challenges, specifically spice challenges. He'd been doing them for a while, starting with standard hot peppers and working his way up through extracts and sauces most people would never touch. His audience liked watching him suffer through it, and he leaned into that. It was his thing. Escalation pushed him further. By late 2018, Henrik had moved past peppers and obtained a highly concentrated capsaicin extract not meant to be consumed directly. The challenge that night was simple: one undiluted drop onto the tongue. He set up in his apartment kitchen. Basic camera on a counter. A live audience feed is running. He had milk and water nearby, his version of a safety net. No one else was in the apartment. I spent a long time sitting with this detail because it changes everything about what happened next. Just Henrik, a camera, and a glass applicator. His prior experience gave him confidence. He'd handled extracts before. He'd coughed, sweated through it, and recovered. But what the footage shows is that this was different from the first second. The drop hit his tongue, and the reaction was immediate: violent coughing, deep, uncontrolled gagging. His body rejected it instantly. Saliva flooded his mouth and he tried to swallow and cough at the same time, two reflexes fighting each other. His airway was caught between clearing itself and being overwhelmed. He reached for the milk. His hand knocked it sideways. It spilled across the counter. The coughing didn't stop. It came in continuous fits without a full breath in between. Every attempt to inhale triggered another cough before his lungs could fill. At one point, he managed a partial breath, and that's when it shifted. The coughing turned wetter. He gagged hard, and a small amount of liquid came up. Instead of clearing it, he inhaled mid-spasm. That's where it likely crossed into something more dangerous. Material entering the airway instead of being expelled. He bent forward over the counter, still coughing, still unable to get a controlled breath. I've covered a lot of stories on this channel, and this one is hard because you can hear it. The sound of someone trying to breathe and just not getting there. There's a brief stretch where the coughing stops entirely, not because it resolved, but because the airflow stops. His coordination slipped, and his hands no longer gripped the counter properly. During one prolonged episode, he lost his balance and fell onto the kitchen floor. After the fall, there was no coordinated movement and no return to effective breathing. Emergency services were called by a neighbor who heard the commotion. By the time they arrived, Henrik was unresponsive. He was transported to the hospital but was pronounced dead shortly after arrival. Investigators reviewed the recording and documented a collapse during prolonged respiratory distress. No evidence of external injury. The cause of death was consistent with severe airway irritation with possible aspiration. The extract container was recovered and logged. I spent hours thinking about Henrik's case and kept coming back to the same thought. The way I see it, this is the most preventable death I've ever covered, and that's exactly what makes it so haunting. For me, the next story will test your patience differently, because this time the danger wasn't hiding in an unlabeled container. It was hopping around in the backyard. It was August 9, 2015, and the desert outskirts of Tucson, Arizona were doing what they always do in midsummer: baking. Triple digits had held steady all week, and even as the afternoon stretched toward evening, the ground still radiated heat. The landscape was flat, dry, and sparse. Low scrub, cracked dirt, and the kind of open emptiness that makes you feel like you're standing on another planet. About 20 minutes outside the city, a patch of cleared desert sat next to a parked car, a camera on a short tripod, and two people getting ready to film. Laura Boff was 26. She made wildlife content, not the polished nature documentary kind, but the up-close, hands-on, slightly reckless kind. She'd built a small following by putting herself in proximity to desert creatures most people avoid. Insects, lizards, small reptiles. She wasn't a biologist or a handler. She was self-taught, curious, and comfortable around things that made other people flinch. That combination got views. It also meant the challenges kept getting bigger. This one involved scorpions. The setup was a clear plastic box, roughly the size of a small storage container, filled with multiple live scorpions. These weren't random desert species. They were identified later as Arizona bark scorpions, a species known for medically significant venom. The plan was to place the box over her head and sit still for 60 seconds while they moved freely inside the enclosure. That was it. 60 seconds. She wore a loose shirt with an open collar, which left her neck and upper chest exposed beneath the box. Her assistant stood a few feet away, operating the camera. The scorpions were active. They'd been confined in a small space in desert heat, which is exactly the condition that makes them agitated and defensive. And the box was tight enough that once placed, there was leaving very little space between the animals and her skin. The camera was rolling when the box went on. The scorpions reacted immediately, scrambling across the enclosure and onto her skin. Within seconds, one stung just below her jawline. The footage shows a sharp flinch. Her head jerks sideways, shoulders pulling up. That single movement changed everything. In that space, sudden motion can trigger repeated defensive stings from multiple scorpions in close contact. The agitation didn't build, it spiked. The stings came in tight bursts, neck, chest, collarbone, one after another with no real gap. It stops feeling random almost immediately. It feels like she's stuck in it. The assistant's footage makes that clear. Her hands come up to grab the box, but something's already off. Her fingers don't close right. That loss of coordination is consistent with the effects of venom affecting muscle control, not just pain. Then she drops to her knees, and the worst part is the box doesn't fully come off. It shifts, but keeps contact. That means more stings, not fewer. For me, this is the moment it stops looking manageable. Once you're getting hit that many times that fast, it's not chance anymore. It's already out of your control. Her breathing changed before she fully went down. Shallow, uneven. Witnesses later noted excessive salivation and muscle twitching along her jaw and neck. Her movement slowed on the ground, becoming minimal with no clear recovery. The assistant pulled the box away, and the camera kept recording. Responders later noted signs consistent with severe systemic neurotoxicity or a rapid hypersensitivity reaction, both capable of compromising breathing without immediate treatment. The progression wasn't instant, but it was fast. Emergency responders documented multiple envenomation sites across her neck and upper chest, consistent with high venom exposure in a short window. No additional trauma was identified. The footage captured the full sequence: placement, first sting, escalation, and collapse. The remaining scorpions were cleared by local handlers. I honestly can't bear anything crawling on my skin, especially animals or scorpions, let alone that many. Now, this next story is quite different, because this time the danger wasn't alive, wasn't moving, wasn't crawling. It was just sand sitting there, waiting for someone to step into it. It was July 18, 2017, and the glamorous sand dunes in California were living up to their reputation. Endless rolling hills of fine, pale sand reflecting the sun back from every angle. Even as the afternoon wore on, the heat was relentless, and the wind was just strong enough to keep the surface shifting. Out in the open, there's no shade, no shelter, just the sound of wind and the crunch of boots on sand. Giovani Skell was 27. He worked in a warehouse during the week, but on weekends he filmed outdoor survival challenges. He wasn't a professional, but he was resourceful, stubborn, and always looking for the next idea to impress his small but loyal online audience. He'd done cold water plunges, buildings, makeshift shelters, and a few buried stunts before, but always with some kind of backup plan. That consistency made him feel prepared for anything. This time, the idea was a vertical escape pit. Dig a narrow hole about 6 to 7 feet deep and roughly 2.5 feet wide. Fill it with loose sand while he stood upright and try to climb out using only his body. 2 friends were there to dig and film. The whole thing was supposed to be endurance content, not a risk-your-life stunt. The pit was dug into fine, dry dune sand. No wall reinforcement, no boards, just a vertical shaft carved into the dune. The thinking was that loose sand would be easier to move through than packed dirt. He said on camera that the softness would work in his favor. They started shoveling sand around his legs, then up to his waist, chest, and finally his shoulders. The sand settled quickly, filling every gap and pressing in from all sides. I actually visited Glamis a few years ago, and I remember how deceptively heavy that sand feels when you try to move through it. It's nothing like the beach. It's dense, and it shifts under your weight in a way that makes every step a struggle. Watching the footage, you can see Giovani's confidence at first. He flexes his arms, tries to wiggle his legs, but as the sand rises, his movement gets more limited. By the time it's up to his neck, he's basically locked in place. Every exhale lets the sand settle tighter around his chest and abdomen. He tries to push upward, but the sand absorbs the force. His chest expansion becomes visibly limited. Breathing gets shallower, shoulders barely moving. The friends keep filming, encouraging him, but the tone shifts as it becomes clear he's not making progress. He starts to lean forward, trying to shift his weight, but the sand presses in harder. Breathing gets faster and more shallow. No panic, just a slow realization that he can't get enough air. His movement slows, becoming minimal with no clear recovery. He's still upright, but the sand is holding him in place. His friends start digging immediately, but every shovelful they remove is replaced by more sand collapsing into the pit. Several minutes passed without a successful extraction as the sand continued collapsing inward. Extraction is delayed by the unstable walls and the sheer volume of sand flowing back in. When responders finally reach him, there's no visible breathing or movement. The cause of death was determined to be compressive asphyxia due to external pressure preventing chest expansion. No other trauma, no injuries beyond compression marks left by the sand. The pit itself is partially collapsed, unstable even during recovery efforts. I spent 3 hours researching this, and what I found shocked me. There are dozens of cases where people underestimate how quickly loose sand can trap and suffocate someone. It's not dramatic, it's just physics. And in Giovani's case, it was a situation that turned into a trap before anyone realized what was happening. The next story shows something just as dangerous in a completely different way, because this time, it only takes a few seconds in the wrong place for everything to go irreversible. It was May 22, 2017, and rural Oklahoma was deep into late spring, warm, humid, the kind of afternoon where the air sits heavy and the sky stretches flat in every direction. Along a 2-lane road cutting through open farmland, wooden utility poles lined the shoulder at regular intervals, their crossarms carrying distribution lines that hummed faintly in the stillness. No sidewalks, no fences, no warning signs at the base, just poles, wires, and empty road. This is where Valo decided to film. Valo was 22. He worked a labor job, physical, hands-on, the kind of work that kept him in shape but didn't pay enough to feel like a career. What he really cared about was parkour. He'd been practicing informally for a couple of years, teaching himself from videos and running routes through whatever structures he could find. He wasn't trained. He didn't have a crew or a gym. He just had a phone, a friend willing to film, and a habit of picking locations based on what looked impressive rather than what was safe. A lot of you asked about this after my last video, whether these creators ever scouted their locations beforehand. And the answer, at least in Diast's case, is no. He picked spots on the fly. That day, driving along the rural road, he saw the utility pole and decided it was the next climb. Tall, visible, good for content. His friend parked nearby and set up to film from below, capturing a full-body view looking straight up. No gloves, no harness, no insulation gear, nothing between his skin and whatever whatever was at the top. The pole had metal staples embedded in the wood, maintenance steps used by line workers who climb with proper equipment and clearance protocols. Deist used them like a ladder. The footage shows him ascending steadily, hand over hand, foot over foot, moving with the kind of casual confidence that comes from someone who's climbed plenty of things and never gotten hurt. He reaches approximately 25 to 30 feet above the ground, roughly the height of a 3-story building, and shifts his position near the crossarm at the top. He adjusts his balance, planting his feet on the staples and straightening up. He doesn't touch the wire. That's the detail that catches people off guard. The footage shows his arm moving within inches of an energized distribution line, and an electrical arc forms between the wire and his arm before direct contact is made. At that voltage, the current doesn't need you to touch it. It jumps. His body stiffened immediately. Every muscle locked at once, the kind of involuntary contraction that removes all control. His grip held for a brief moment as current passed through, and visible burn points began forming at the entry area on his arm. Then his muscles released and his grip gave out. He fell straight down, 30 feet of open air between the crossarm and the hard-packed ground below. No branches, no wires in the way, nothing to slow or redirect the fall. His friend's camera captured the entire sequence in one continuous shot. The arc, the lock, the release, and the impact. There was no movement after he hit the ground. He was transported to the hospital but was pronounced dead shortly after arrival. The cause of death was determined to be high-voltage electrical exposure combined with blunt force trauma from the fall. The footage was later reviewed by investigators as part of the case. The utility area was temporarily restricted while the lines were inspected, and no damage to the infrastructure was found. And if Deist taught me anything, it's that sometimes the gap between this might work and the ground below you is even shorter than you think. However, the next story reminded me that sometimes that gap isn't vertical at all. It's the 3 feet between a highway shoulder and an active lane. It was September 14th, 2018, and Atlanta, Georgia was wrapping up another humid Friday. The temperature had barely dipped below 80 even as evening settled in, and the interstate was doing what Atlanta interstates always do, moving fast, running tight, and leaving almost no room for error. The shoulder along this particular stretch was narrow, maybe 3 to 4 feet of paved space between the white line and the guardrail before the ground dropped off into grass. Cars in the right lane were passing within arm's reach of that edge. Not the kind of place you'd want to stand, let alone dance. Mela Draasque was 23. She worked in food service, long shifts, inconsistent hours, the kind of job you take to pay rent while you figure out what you actually want to do. What she wanted to do was make content, short dance clips specifically. She had a small following built on filming herself in unusual outdoor locations, rooftops, parking garages, overpasses. The appeal wasn't the dancing itself, it was the contrast, a choreographed routine in a place where it didn't belong. It got attention, and attention kept her motivated. She filmed during off hours with one friend who drove and operated the camera. That night, the concept was something they'd seen floating around online. Exit a slowly moving car, dance alongside it while it rolls, get back in. Simple in theory. The kind of thing that looks effortless in a 15-second clip, but requires everything to go exactly right in real time. They chose a highway shoulder, not a side street, not a parking lot, an active interstate shoulder with traffic flowing in the adjacent lane. I've been obsessed with this detail since I first read the case file, because it means every single second she was outside that car, she was standing within 3 feet of vehicles doing 60 plus. No one was watching for oncoming traffic as the filming vehicle rolled slowly along the shoulder, recording from the driver's side. The footage from inside the car shows Mela stepping out of the passenger side. She finds her footing on the shoulder and starts moving, matching the car's pace, hitting her routine, staying in frame. For a few seconds, it works. The car rolls slowly. She keeps up, and the shot looks exactly like what they planned. But her position starts drifting, not dramatically, just a few inches at a time, adjusting her steps to stay in the camera's frame. Each adjustment pulls her slightly closer to the active lane. The shoulder is so narrow that the difference between safe and exposed is less than a single step. A second vehicle vehicle approaches from behind in the adjacent lane. It's moving at full highway speed, significantly faster than the slow-rolling filming car. The driver of the filming vehicle maintains position. No honk, no acceleration to create buffer space, no warning. And honestly, I don't think they even saw it coming. The approaching vehicle veers slightly toward the shoulder as it passes. Not a dramatic swerve, just the natural drift that happens when a driver adjusts at speed near a slow-moving obstacle. The impact is lateral. The camera inside the filming car captures the approach, the moment of contact, and the immediate aftermath in one unbroken shot. Mela is displaced sideways onto the roadway. Her body hits the pavement directly with no barrier, no guardrail, nothing between her and the asphalt. The striking vehicle continued briefly before stopping further down the road, where the driver remained at the scene. Emergency responders arrived and observed no visible movement at the scene. She was transported to the hospital but was pronounced dead shortly after arrival. The cause of death was determined to be blunt force trauma consistent with a high-speed vehicular impact. The in-car footage was recovered and provided a complete timeline of the incident from exit to impact. Investigators noted active traffic proximity and limited shoulder space as the primary contributing factors. The roadway was cleared after standard response procedures. No mechanical failure was found in either vehicle, and no substances were involved.